Alright, let's do this. Hello Internet, what's going on? That's right, it's me, Ricardo, the Cynical Critic. Oh, what's this? Well, this is my waifu here. Her name is Ying. She's a little short, so I had to prop her up on the table, but that's okay, because I love her for who she is. So yeah, I had some leftover foam board from a project, so I decided to make myself a cutout. I'm pathetically lonely. Anyways guys, here we are with my final thoughts of RWBY Volume 2, so let's get started. Now just like last time, I do have a bit of a revelation for you guys. Previously I told you guys that no, I indeed had watched all of RWBY so far, and that I tried to keep up to date with most of the episodes. But this time it's about a volume, particularly this volume. Yeah, I don't know if you guys remember, but I told you that I really don't like anime all that much, and it's for a variety of reasons, mainly that I just didn't feel any fulfillment from them. For the most part, they seem more interested in spectacle than substance, which is a big deal for me. And when Rooster Teeth announced RWBY, I thought it was going to be the same thing, but thankfully it wasn't. It was much more than I thought it was ever going to be. So one could say that Monty inspired me to give anime a chance to change my mind. That's not the only thing he changed my mind about. There was something else. See, I'm not sure if any other show has done this, but for Monty, he wanted the fans to have a part in RWBY, which is one of the reasons why he actually encouraged you guys to create your own characters and create your own stories. That's right, Monty encouraged fanfiction. Now sadly at the time I wasn't really that into fanfiction, mainly because I thought that there was a lack of creativity in the community. Again, it was like anime, where there might be some good gems out there, but it was just buried under a bunch of mediocrity, and I wasn't willing to sift through it. Well, this sort of created an internal conflict with me, because, like everyone else, I created my own characters too.
Say what?
Yeah, I've gotten over my shame. I'm more than willing to say that I created my own characters, but more importantly, I created my own story when it came to RWBY. It's one of the reasons why I actually created this channel, not just to review, but also to share my own ideas with others and to see what they thought about it. But I would have to say that unlike most people, I really didn't want to have a fanfiction. Again, I thought it was the lazy way of creativity. And while I'll get into this in more detail later on, for now I'll just say this. I went back and forth with the idea, and there was this event that pushed me over the edge and got me to sit down and actually take this seriously. And that, of course, was, well, Monty passing away. I told myself that, you know what, you are starting to love these characters, you are creating your own story, and all that you're really using is the world of Remnant. Maybe you should give it yourself a chance. If not for you, then at least for Monty's sake. There's no point in coming up with these great ideas if you're just going to bottle them up and throw them in the shoebox of shame. Yes, for any of you wondering out there, I actually have several shoeboxes where all my ideas go into because I don't think that they are good enough to share with people, that I actually call the shoebox of shame. And Tales of Remnant, Souls and Shadows was about to go into that. But I told myself that no, Monty inspired me. I'm going to take this as far as I can. If it becomes something, great. And if it doesn't, at least I tried. Surprisingly, I do think now that it has some potential. While I'll get into this later, for now I just wanted to share that, yeah, when it came to Volume 2, despite it not being the greatest in some people's eyes, I will always remember it as the time that I was inspired by Monty to spread my creative wings and fly. But again, more on that later. For now, let's get started with my final thoughts on RWBY Volume 2. You see, unlike my reviews where I try to be as objective as possible, and granted I can only be as objective as possible, there is going to be some bias, like every review there's always some bias, but here I'm going to pretty much put all that aside and just give you my personal thoughts on it. And I want to hear what you guys thought about RWBY Volume 2. Write it in the comment section below. Try to keep it short. I know some of you guys out there like to write paragraphs long. You know who you are. If you really want to, man, make a video. It's not that hard. But as for my video, once again, we're going to start off with the bad first. I'll get to the good later, but I want to start with the bad just because it's always nice to end this on a positive note. So without further ado, what I thought was wrong with Volume 2. The first and most important thing, as you guys might have caught with a lot of my reviews, was plot. Sadly, there just wasn't enough, considering the fact that it is the second volume. Yes, while Volume 1 really didn't need much plot because it was just us getting our team together, Volume 2 really needed that because, well, we're in the second volume. We're needing to get the story rolling. And for anybody who's wondering, yes, there's a difference between plot and story. Story is the overall tale that is being told, where plot is more or less the goal that we're heading for. It more or less involves the villains, and as you might have noticed, there just wasn't enough screen time with them. Yes, more than Volume 1, but not enough for us to really get an idea of what they may be planning. Yes, we had some idea by the end, but however, it was still obscure. Their goals were ambiguous, and their reasons absent. More importantly, I think Cinder, Emerald, and Mercury should have played a bigger role. They should have interacted with other students a bit more heavily in order to give us the idea that they were there for a reason other than, well, why were they at this school? Which brings me to my second thing. There were some characters that were just introduced just to be. Off the top of my head, I can only think of about 5, which really didn't play much of a role. And those are, of course, the 3 villains, Cinder, Emerald, Mercury, but also Neptune and Velvet. Yeah, the character that they had a contest about to figure out what her costume was going to be. You would have expected her to have more of a role to play in this volume. Sadly, she didn't. And when I speak that they were just there, it seemed like they were going to be part of the story, but sadly they were just characters fulfilling a role. I wanted to know more about them, not just their history, but how they would interact with other people. And sadly, we didn't get that kind of development, which is kind of surprising because that seemed to be a key factor in a lot of the episodes there. Most prominently, episode 4, 11, and 12, where there were key moments where we could have had great development, but it was kind of rushed past so that we can have some good action. Which I'll say again, guys, you do not want to sacrifice character, plot, or world development just so that you can have a cool action scene. I'm not one who doesn't enjoy fights like that. I love fights. But generally, a fight is just going to stick in your mind momentarily, whereas a good development moment is going to last even after you're done watching the show. I mean, all I have to say is Yang and Blake, and most of us, our minds do not go back to them fighting, but instead goes back to that classroom where they had such a wonderful moment together. Granted, some of you have perverted that with your ships, which should transition me to ships in general. Not the idea of shipping itself, but the fact that some people hold to the ships as if they're canon. They're not canon, people. They're barely even a concept. Worse was the fact that I believe that Rooster Teeth kind of encouraged the shipping. Yes, as some people have commented to tell me, the ships came before they were introduced into the show. You guys know the moment, I complained about it a lot. But my complaint wasn't the fact that Rooster Teeth created the ships or not, it was the fact that Rooster Teeth acknowledged them. You don't want to acknowledge these kind of people. It only feeds their fire, which consumes all and ruins everything. Again, going back to the beginning of this video, it's one of the reasons why I didn't like fanfiction. And the same thing pretty much goes with ships. For the most part, they're pretty bad, and they just don't make any sense. What else doesn't make sense is the fact that Rooster Teeth knows how to create characters, yet for some reason, they don't know how to create villains. Villains are just characters who have a different motive against our heroes. To them, they're the heroes of their own story. Yeah, so far the only villain who's had any character whatsoever has been Torchwick, and that's just because of who he is. He's a charismatic con man. Yet the main baddie, Cinder, doesn't seem to have any character in her whatsoever. Except for, of course, I am evil. Because what they needed was more screen time, and sadly, they didn't get that. Sure, she had more than she had in Volume 1, but Volume 1, she only had 2 scenes, so technically that isn't much to talk about. What we needed was more like what we got in Episode 5. Just brief moments of the 3 talking to each other, explaining things that are going on and how it may affect them. Sure, we wouldn't really get what they're planning, but it would give us the idea that they're having an active participation in the plot. That way, by the end of the volume, we would feel that they had achieved something. But speaking about that last episode, my God, what a disappointment. And judging by some of the comments you guys wrote, I'm not the only one thinking that. It was less about the fight we got, and more of the fact that how they approached it. Rather than it being this desperate scramble to fight off the Grimm, we more or less just got a fanfiction video. Yes, Monty knew how to do fighting. He was great at it, and you guys love his dead fantasy for some reason. But let's face the fact. We were building up tension all the way up to the episode 12 that was never paid off. Once again, all they had to do was put in a few key moments where the characters were actually struggling against the fight, and it looked like they may lose, but we didn't get any of that. Pretty much every single character dominated the fight that they were put in. Again, I did defend that there were a lot of huntsmen in that fight, but still, there was tension that was built, you needed to pay it off, and they didn't pay it off whatsoever. And what's even worse was that we didn't really get much of a finale at all. Characters pretty much just said, oh, well, I guess that usually happens. We'll be ready next time. And before any of you complain, yes, I knew who Adam was, but sadly, most people didn't. A good number of people did not watch the trailers because, well, they're called trailers rather than preseason episodes. Like I said, we could have used a flashback back in episode 10 when Blake was thinking about her past. That way we could have known who Adam was. Rather than him appearing at the very end going, they'll listen to me because I'm a badass. So yeah, sadly, as you might have guessed, this volume had a lot of problems, but there were some things I liked. Which of course brings me to what I liked about Volume 2. those character developing moments. I'll be more than willing to admit that Volume 2 so far has some of the best character developing moments in the series. So far, I mean, the series is not over yet. Two of my favorite ones, of course, is Blake and Yang, but also the talk between Oobleck and RWBY. First of all, it opened Oobleck up more as a person than an actual professor.
It's Dr. Oobleck.
I don't give a fuck.
And it gave us a dynamic that we hadn't seen since back in Volume 1. I think around like episode 11 or something. It's hard to tell, to cut it up. But it was back when Weiss was talking to Port and when RWBY was talking to Oz. It was the older generation guiding the new generation. And I just love this moment here. Oobleck's reasons for being a huntsman is one of the reasons why a lot of people love that character. Second reason, of course, is just because he's voiced by Joel. And I still love it how RWBY wasn't asked to be a huntsman, as her reasons are pretty much basically that she just wants to be a hero. She's still young, she's still innocent. It's pretty much the same reason we would have given when we were kids, asking if we could be superheroes, why would we be a superhero? It just gave us that feeling of youthful optimism. And the second thing I loved about Volume 2 was a general feeling as well. A general feeling throughout the volume that the characters were fighting back. Again, going back to that whole youthful optimism. It's like when we get in those stories where a bunch of kids are the only ones who notice that the bad guy is doing something, so they're the ones who decide to go out and put an end to him. Regardless of whether or not they get detention or not, they're going to put a stop to his plans once and for all. It's something that I would have to say is sort of absent in a lot of movies today, especially when it comes to kid movies. And heck, I would say in a lot of shows as well. Just that feeling that we're going to stop him because he's doing something bad, and we're going to be the heroes that no one else is willing to be. Despite the fact that everyone else is probably trying to stop them, but more in a, legal way. And every time they interacted with Torchwick was entertaining as all hell. The guy is an amazing character. And what also was amazing, and I'm not afraid to admit this, even though I just complained about it, was those fights. Again, Monty instinctively knew how to set up those fights, and they all were just fantastic. Volume 1 showed us that this show may have some pretty interesting fights, and Volume 2 proved that to us. Again, one of my favorites is still that train sequence, how they interacted with each of the characters, how they switched from each scene, but more importantly, the fact that they were able to weave character development in with the fights. We still have some questions, which is good, because that way we can get answers later on in the series. Who was that lady that saved Yang, and why was Neil so afraid of her? What exactly has the Sneed family done to the White Fang to deserve such hatred towards them? And why does Blake feel like she's being personally attacked with Torchwick and the White Fang teaming up? These are all great questions that we won't get answers for a while, but we got answers to some other questions along with an amazing fight. And we also got some world building with that train sequence, which is another thing I loved about Volume 2. Back in Volume 1, we had a hint that there was more history to this place than was originally being led on, but now we really get to the meat of the bone. Just those 2 episodes of us being in Mountain Glen prove to us just how brutal this world can be. An entire city destroyed and much of its people killed. And yet we still have a lighthearted tone to this show, which is kind of weird, but trust me, that'll make more sense later on. And again, going back to episode 3 and 4, one of the things that I kind of liked was, of course, that robot that we were introduced to. Again, it showed us how terrible the Grid must be for them to need such weapons to defend themselves with. But if I had to put down 2 things that I actually absolutely love about Volume 2, the things that I still remember to this day when I think about Volume 2, would have to be, firstly, the talk between Yang and Blake. My God, it's still one of the best scenes of the show. Not only do we get a very artistically done flashback, but it tells us a bit more about both characters. Despite being so reclusive, Blake is fiercely determined to stand for what she believes in, which is a similar personality to Yang, which is one of the reasons why she comes alongside Blake at that time, because she knows that feeling, and she knows that path that she's gone down, and she's trying to stop her from going down it herself. I can go all day. Hell, I can make an entire video speaking about just that talk alone. But I think you guys get the picture. I love that scene, regardless of whether or not it, encouraged the Bumblebee shippers. Now, the second scene that I absolutely loved was that talk around the campfire with each of the girls giving their reasons, and more importantly, questioning their reasons. My favorite was from Weiss, because despite the fact that her family is hated so much by the White Fang, despite the fact that her family is pretty much seen as, well, not ironmongers, but dustmongers, she is determined to bring back some honor to her name and to right the wrongs that her father has committed. The others were great too. I love how Blake is so sensitive and that she feels, well, almost obligated to stand for others, despite the fact that, well, she has a tendency to run away. And it's interesting to see Yang so determined to get some freedom back in her life because she's pretty much had none since her mother left. All this and more is one of the reasons why, despite the fact that I do think that Volume 2 is one of the weaker ones, I still love it. And I still love the show. So yeah, despite the fact that you guys kept complaining in the comment section below, I did like the show and there are reasons to my, well, disappointment. I'm looking forward to Volume 3 because yeah, shit gets real, but also because there are some things that I have pretty much refrained myself from talking about that I really want to talk about that I can't talk about until I am finished reviewing Volume 3 because they become more, well, obvious then. So guys, thank you so much for watching my video on my final thoughts on RWBY Volume 2. So what were your final thoughts? Again, write them in the comment section below. I would love to hear about them. And regardless of whatever your thoughts and ideas may be, remember this guys, in all that you do and create, go forth and inspire. I'll catch you guys next time. Toodles!